Managers, if you need a question for your next team meeting, here's one you can try.
Hey, I love this question. You want to save this video because it's going to be a long one. The fundamental principle that I teach as a manager is to be proactive. In this case, you have to definitely be proactive. And this is a great question to ask because preferably in a group setting so people can learn from each other. But if you've never asked this question, you want to make sure that you do this correctly and effectively and so that people feel comfortable. So before you do that, you've got to make sure you as a manager are following up so you can understand context and examples of how people are improving because in your follow-up, that's the point of the conversation, right? That's the point of follow-up. So you can guide and coach and correct as people are doing the work. The second thing is that you're properly setting expectations so people can meet those expectations. You have more context there. And also that you're planning to goals, KPIs, so that people understand what they're trying to accomplish. Those things are fundamental before you even ask this question. Here's another thing. You want to make sure at least you set up one person that wants to share their experience that happened during the week. For example, if you have Bob that says, "Hey Bob, I'm gonna ask this question in our agenda for this next week about things that mistakes people have done. Do you mind sharing that example that we just had yesterday about the process? Remember, it's about the process, not the individual of the process that you did about your plan, actual variance, and what you learned from that. I think it's an important component that people can learn from because there's a lot of people that do similar work. So that right there, you set up at least one person so that they can have that discussion in that meeting. So the thing about the meeting is that just make sure that you have an agenda and you pose that question somewhere in there that it relates because here's the thing, it's going to take a lot of discussion, right? So either one, you put it at the very beginning, right? So that you can have that discussion, or you put it at the end, right? So, hey, final thing we're going to follow, the final conversation we're going to have is this, right? So remember, this can derail everything if you don't do this correctly. Now, when you have the meeting, you can open that question because the assumption is that people may not want to share. If you're open it blindly and you want to ask that question, the assumption is that people don't want to share. So, what do you do when people don't want to share? Do you begin pointing things out? Then it becomes this finger pointing where, hey, Jill, do you mind sharing last week? And they're like, no, I don't want to share. Right. So, what do you do then? That's the whole point, right? Is that people feel comfortable doing that. And you don't want people feeling like uncomfortable because you're asking this question and then you're pointing things out. Because if you're not doing this correctly and no one says anything and you're the one saying, okay, let me share my experience, that's not the point of this. The point is that you as a manager shouldn't share your experiences because the assumption or the perception is that you're the one making all the mistakes, right? And you as a manager should limit your mistakes because the assumption is that you're making the right decisions for the benefit of the organization and your customer. So here's the thing. You don't want to default to like, okay, let me share mine. No, that's not the case. The point is that people can share their own experiences of the process of what they're doing so they can improve and share within the group and how we can help each other, right? That's the whole point of this question so that you can share and feel comfortable like, hey, Jill, hey, and then someone's going to say, oh, I had the same problem. Let me share what I've learned, right? Because that's the whole intent of this question. So they can share and share resources, share processes, share how they did things differently. So they can share either techniques, tactics, strategy, whatever that is. So they can, break down silos within the team. But if no one says anything, what do you do? What do you do? Right? Or if what they share is not good enough for people can learn. Here's the other part. You want to make sure that you preference this question and say, hey guys, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the process itself and how we can learn. Just say, hey, this is nothing personal. We want to understand, how to improve these processes. So we're going to have to share what we learned so far, and that's okay. You have to make sure this you tell everybody that's okay. We're learning as we go. So there's a lot to this right here. I definitely love the question, but you've got to be ready as a manager with context, with empathy, and what your intent is with this question. Because one, Employees will see right through what you're trying to do. And the second thing is you want people to leave and going, okay, I did learn something from this meeting. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to apply what I've learned. And here's the last thing. So when you ask that question, what are you going to do as a manager? Is there follow-up actions? Is there things you need to follow up with they share mistakes? What do you do with that? You have to have some intent when you ask this question, meaning that if there's something that people share that you need to follow up with, guess what? I have to make a note of it in my meeting notes to say, I'm going to follow up Jill to make sure that she's okay with this process. Do they update SOPs? Do they update processes? What are they going to do with this? It can't just be a open discussion. Let's just share rah, rah, rah. You got to have intent as a manager so they can see that you're making improvements to both culture and outcomes.